Welcome to everyone for this momentous occasion. I am Barbara Wingo, the president of the Friends of the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings Farm, Incorporated, welcoming you to our event in which we are celebrating 75 years of the Yearling movie with our extremely special guest, Claude Jarman Jr., who played Jody in the movie. Now, the first thing I want to mention, silence all your cell phones immediately. There will be 3 or 4 official photographers. No other photography is allowed during the presentation, nor during the movie. We will start the activities today with a brief welcome from the mayor of Ocala, Kent Gwynn.
Thank you, Barbara. Thanks for everyone being here today. How many people are from Ocala? Raise your hands. Great. So you know the Marion Theatre. Great. So, one of the things real quick, and I'll be real brief, but this is important. Back in 2003 when we did our master plan, this was the first thing that we saved, and we saved it for days like today that we could hold these events in. So it's wonderful. And I was telling Claude, this theater opened in 1941. The movie came out in 45, and then I think went in the theaters in 46. So shortly thereafter, after this theater was open, we had the Yearling here. So thanks everyone for being here. This event has been a great success. We're so happy that Claude came all the way from California, his lovely wife Katie, who's around here somewhere. So we welcome them. Katie, thank y'all, and enjoy the movie, everyone.
Thank you. First, I want to mention the order of events. After the interview, there will be a brief intermission in order to clear the stage, and for any of you who want to take a break, visit the concessions or the facilities. After the movie is shown, the book and photographs will be sold again in the front lobby, and Mr. Jarman will be signing at the same place until the close of the event, which is 5:30. I'd like to first begin by telling you a little bit about who we are, the Friends of the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings Farm, Incorporated. We are the citizen support organization for the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings Historic State Park, which is where Rawlings wrote the Yearling, and which is basically recreates, or actually sustains, a house and gardens and citrus grove as it was in the 1930s and 1940s. We provide monies for events there. We buy things like ducks and cleaning supplies to larger items. So all of the proceeds from these 2 events that we've had today and yesterday will go toward the support of the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings State Park. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Claude Jarman Jr. Discovered by director Clarence Brown in Nashville, Tennessee, to play the part of Jody in The Yearling, Claude Jarman Jr. won a juvenile Oscar for that performance. He appeared in an additional 10 motion pictures, including Intruder in the Dust, based on a novel by William Faulkner, and Rio Grande, in which he played the son of John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara. He retired from motion pictures at the tender age of 21 in 1956, but returned to the motion picture world as the director of the San Francisco International Film Festival in 1965. His reminiscences have recently been published, My Life and the Final Days of Hollywood. This book is available in the lobby for purchase, and that again is partially for the benefit of the Friends and for signature after the motion picture. I would also like to recognize that 3 of Mr. Jarman's children are here, if they would stand up. Claude Jarman III, Murray Jarman, and Elizabeth Suddeth. Donna Green-Townsend, who I'm going to introduce momentarily, will be recognizing some other special guests as part of the presentation. Now I'd like to talk to you about her. She is a member of our board, the Friends of the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings Farm. She is a journalist with 40 years of radio and television experience. She worked as a news director, producer, anchor, reporter, and instructor for commercial and public radio and television stations in Missouri, Kansas, and Florida. She has received the prestigious Edward R. Moore Award from the Radio and Television Digital News Association, as well as other state and regional journalism awards. She completed 31 years at the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications, where she was a WUFT multimedia news manager and taught advanced radio reporting. So we're very lucky to have her on our board and to have her as our interviewer, and I'm turning the program over to Donna.
Wow, hope I can live up to all the hype. Thank you, Barbara. I'm just tickled to get to be the one up here on the stage with Claude. I know my husband, one of the first things he said to Claude when he saw him was, "Coons is clean." But he forgot the other part, that lie down, boy. Now, lie down, boy. I know many of you are probably feel the same way. You know so many of the phrases from that movie because that movie represented this part of the state so well. Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, who wrote The Yearling and won a Pulitzer Prize for it in 1939, she spent time in the woods, in the scrub, in the Ocala National Forest, and the movie did a wonderful job of really following that book. I think most of you would probably agree. And so we're so lucky that MGM turned this movie into a classic. But before we get going with Claude, we do want to recognize some folks. But even before that, I wanted to just take just a very quick moment of silence, if we could, because we had just learned about those horrible tornadoes that had happened, and there were quite a few deaths, and there's still a lot going on trying to find people. So if we could just take a couple seconds to remember what's going on in the Midwest right now. I know, Claude, you're from basically the Midwest when you grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, so I'm sure you were thinking about all of this as well. I'm from Missouri originally, and we're always afraid of tornadoes.
Oh, yes. Well, we certainly had them when I was growing up also, and used to go down in the cellar.
Yeah.
Like a lot of other people. Can anybody hear me okay?
Move it a little bit closer. Move it a little bit
closer? Is
there
that better?
You go.
Okay.
They're terrifying. Well, we have some folks in the audience who are very special because they had a part in the movie. It first took place, MGM came here in 1941 to begin making the movie, and that production ended for a variety of reasons. Spencer Tracy didn't really like the bugs and the heats, and he went back to California. And then it took back up on a second attempt in 1945. But in the audience right now, we have some members of the Kinsey family, and they had relatives who worked on the film, doing a variety of things. Raise your hand or stand up if you could. We have some Kinseys right here. Lawrence Kinsey did a lot of the things in the movie with setting up trees and logs for the deer to jump over, and Lawrence even rode the bear cage all the way from the train depot here in Ocala to the Silver Springs Park, which that was pretty interesting to me. And right here in the middle, and about the third row, Bobby, can you stand up? Bobby Randall was the double for Claude in the movie in 1945. And yesterday was the first time that they had seen each other in 75 years. Isn't that special? That is just so special. So you'll see Bobby in this movie in a lot of the running scenes. And so look for that. Bobby, I'm so glad you could be here today. And so, as we mentioned, it was 1945. Claude was 10 years old. 10 years old. You weren't trying out for this movie. You were just going to school. 19,000 other boys were trying out for this part through sending in their pictures. And lo and behold, Claude Jarman here didn't have to do anything but look at Clarence Brown. Tell us about that.
Well, I never was sure that there was 19,000. That sounds a little heavy, but nonetheless, I was in a schoolroom in Nashville, and Clarence Brown had been assigned the role at MGM. He was the #1 director at that time. He directed a lot of the Garbo films. He just directed National Velvet, which was the first film of Elizabeth Taylor. So they said he knew how to work with children, so they assigned him that. And they also threw in another caveat that always going to be working with deer and animals. And so it's quite a challenge. And he said, of course, the main thing is to get the right little boy to play the role of Jody. And I don't want a Hollywood like Roddy McDowall or someone else who tried out for the role. He says, I want somebody with a Southern accent, someone who grew up in the South, who's in the South, and I will go find him. And he would go to, he went out, he was a pilot, and he flew his plane to Nashville, Memphis, Birmingham, Atlanta, and the first thing he would do is go into the Board of Education, and he would talk to the superintendent of schools, identify himself, and say, I'd like to go visit the 5th and 6th grades of your schools in the city. Give me a letter that I can give to the principal who will identify me, and I just want to look in the rooms. And if I see someone I want to talk to, I will do it. If I don't, I will leave, and it's created no stir, and no one would know that I'd even been there. And so that was how he ended up in Nashville on a Friday afternoon at Valentine's Day, and he saw me taking down Valentine's, and next thing I know, he wanted to see me, and his assistant wanted to see me in the office. And of course, you wonder, what does someone want in 5th grade? Go to school, and always a little terrifying. And they just talked a little bit about what I like to do, had I ever done any plays. And it's interesting because I had done a lot of plays in the community theater and that sort of thing. I had an interest in it. And he said, well, we'd like to come by in the afternoon and take some pictures. And I said, sure. So I go home and I told my mother, some strange man wanted to come out and take some pictures. And my sister came in, and she said, oh, come on, those were building inspectors. They came to my room, too. So I immediately said, well, I'm going out to play. And I went up the street, and they showed up, and my mother said, well, he's not here.
Oh.
And they said, okay, they left. And then he called back about 15 minutes later, said, do you think you could get him home? We'd like to come back and talk to him. And so she did, and I came back, and they came in and talked to me for a while and asked me if I'd ever heard of the Yearling, and I had not. And said, would you ever be interested in going to Hollywood and making a screen test? And, sure. How far is that going to go, right? And at any rate, after another meeting, and there's some pictures that they took, and they called a week later and said, we want you in Hollywood in another week. So that's how I ended up in Hollywood, and I went out in March, and mid of April, I still didn't know anything. I was just going to the MGM school with Dean Stockwell, Elizabeth Taylor, Jane Powell. It was pretty exciting stuff. And then I started making tests with the actors that they were testing for the role of the mother. And they never tested me in that respect. They never said, this is a test for you, because Mr. Brown said, I make the decision, you're it. And that's how I got the part. And this was in February, and in April, I was in Ocala, Florida, and we started filming. So that's kind of how I got into that situation. And of course, then it was a 2-year effort. Once we did that, we started in April. It was released really in 46, when it the first thing, first real release of the picture. So it was almost a 2-year project.
Now, the premiere of the movie was in December of 1946, and that's why we picked December. So 75 years ago this month was when it premiered in California.
Exactly. And it was interesting because it was just after the end of World War II, and MGM had big promotions about movies are back. They had an ad of Clark Gable's back and so-and-so's got him. So they had all this thing, and they had a huge premiere, and that's when all the people were there. Ava Gardner, everyone who was at MGM at that time, and there were a lot of people. So that was it, and it was a big send-off, and then started out in January on a personal appearance tour. I went to New York for 2 weeks and was on Radio City Music Hall. They were interviewing me, and of course I had the deer with me.
His favorite deer, I heard, right? Was it Little Bambi, your favorite deer?
Yeah, I named him Bambi. And
of course.
It's funny because I always remember the moment. I'm walking down Fifth Avenue, and I had the deer on a leash. And I'm thinking, I got to get out of this. I am not going to be an actor. I cannot do this. But it took me 5 years to get out, but I did eventually.
Well, as you all know, in the following year, in 1947, in April, it won for 2 Academy Awards. It was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Cinematography, Art Direction, and so forth, and won 2, and then you got the Oscar as a Special Juvenile Award.
It was very exciting. I was presented the award by Shirley Temple.
Ooh.
And it was quite exciting. It was a year when there were some fantastic movies that year. Great Expectations. Best Years of Our Lives won the major awards because, of course, it was the end of the war, and Frederick March got it, and so it was stiff competition.
Yeah. Now your father came with you. Correct?
Yes, my father was with me. I was at MGM for 5 years, and my parents did not really like California. They didn't like the movie business. They were very happy in Nashville, and my sister. They spent about a year and a half. And people say, well, why were you do that when you're in California? The problem was, in that 5 years, I made, I think, 6 movies, and all on location. So they were there by themselves a lot when I was on location. So they went back to Nashville. And anytime I wasn't working, I was going back to Nashville.
Yeah. And you
Good
went
old
back.
Southern boy, I'll tell you that right now.
And you went back and you finished college
Yes.
and a lot of other things.
I did. I went to Vanderbilt and went to college. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about what it was like in the Ocala National Forest in the scrub for you. What are your memories of working on a set?
Well, it was, of course, I had never been in a movie, of course, and just throwing me in the midst of that was like, I can see in the picture, I can see scenes that I made in the first week that I was filming, and then I can see scenes that I was in 6 months later. And it's a total amazing difference, because I was much better as the movie went on, because my voice was very sing-songy, and yeah, it was hard. It was very hard, and dealing with animals, I can't tell you how difficult that was. You cannot train a deer. You can't. And what you have to do is you have to let the deer do what it wants to do and adapt to that. Like if you're running through the woods, or if you're running up to the forest or house, which you want to do, the deer has to follow you. And you keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And I think there was one scene that we did it 80 times.
Oh, my. 80 times?
And then I'm supposed to knock on the door. The 80th time, the deer did it, but I forgot to knock on the door.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no.
That will drive people crazy, I'll tell you.
Oh, my goodness. Well, what was it like working with Gregory Peck?
Oh, he was wonderful. He was absolutely wonderful. He was 30 years old. He was just beginning his career. He'd made a movie called Keys of the Kingdom. He'd also finished, before he started, Duel in the Sun, which is one of his better breakout movies. But he and I were in practically every scene together. Every scene he was in, I was in.
Wow.
And so we spent a lot of time together, and he was very patient, I'll put it that way. He's very patient, because it was frustrating dealing with a kid who's never made a movie before, and then at the same time trying to deal with animals, and it was very hard. And then we were dealing with the weather down here. It was April, May, June. I don't have to tell you guys what it's like, but it was brutal. And then in July, the rains came. And
like today, right? The rains today.
It rained every day, and we would sit in the car or sit under a tree waiting for it to give us a break for 15 minutes, and then we'd be out and do a scene. And finally, in August, they gave up. And they said, well, we're going to go back to Hollywood, and we'll finish filming most of it, and then we'll come back in January and finish the films that, like Bobby had to do, running through the woods. And so it was very difficult to work under those circumstances. But finally, MGM did not want to quit. You know, they'd already quit in 1938, and they were not going to not finish this film. And it was, fortunately, and then once we finished filming in June, it took 7 months to do the editing for it, because they had to come back and do some other work. So it was a major, and there was a lot of negative press about it, that it was, you know, the movie that MGM is having a hard time finishing, and they did. But they were determined, and
there
thank
probably
God
wasn't
they did.
any air conditioning back in 1945,
No,
I bet,
it
right?
was brutal.
So you were staying in a hotel across from Silver Springs?
There was in fact, when I went out there the other day, there was a motel across the street, and we were staying in a motel there. And I think there were cabins in 1945, and that's where we all lived. And at night, Clarence Brown, the director, would take me, we'd go for a walk, and he'd talk to me about what our scene was the next day and try to get me into understanding how it's going to go along. And one of the things that you'll see in the movie is we made the movie pretty much in progression. We didn't do the ending first and then this, the other middle part. It was all, once we got into it, when there's problems with the deer and the deer starts eating the crowd, the movie, the way it was filmed, it followed in sequence that way, yeah. So which was helpful to me because it got me into the mood for it, which I look at and I think I still don't know how I did it. I really don't.
Would you like to get a drink of water?
No, it's
okay. Well, there are things that probably were going on to make that movie, because if you were 10 years old, your first acting job, you may not have realized all of the things that were going on behind the scenes. I know in doing some of the interviews with the East Marion County folks, who a lot of them had come back from the war or were looking for jobs. It was a really big thing to get a job working on the movie. But the work that went behind building the set, putting in the log fences, making navigable roads, the thing that really caught my attention were the people that had to get up at 4 a.m. and replant corn in cans in the fields and cover them up with dirt, and then, and then take them back at night so the deer wouldn't eat the corn. What a job that was. There was a lot of things going on behind the scenes that was so interesting.
That's true. And then when they decided to move back to California, they took the whole set, the house, they dismantled it and put it on a soundstage in Hollywood. So there was still some of these scenes that supposedly are outside, but basically they're on a soundstage. So the rain won the war.
Well, I want to go back to Clarence Brown. That when you look back on it, that must have been really special to have had that one-on-one time with someone, the producer like Clarence Brown, taking you under his wing to talk you through the different scenes you were going to do. Especially I want to know about the crying scene. Don't we all know how sad that movie is, how difficult to shoot your pet deer? How did he work with you to, on a first-time acting job, get you to be able to be so emotional?
Well, it's a lot of people say, well, he told you, think about your mom dying or doing this or that. It was none of that. We just talked about the scene. I frankly don't know how I did it, frankly. It was really, really difficult, and you'll see it. I mean, there's a lot of tears. But it was, there's one scene where I've run up to the Forrester house and say that my father had been snake bit, and I'm coming up and tears, and Forrest Tucker comes out. He plays one of the brothers, and he couldn't. He was just staring at me. He couldn't finish his line because he didn't expect me to be, so bawling or whatever. But anyway, Clarence was not happy with him. No,
I bet not. Wow, that was so much pressure.
But Clarence Brown was like a father to me for 2 years. I mean, I'd go out to his ranch on the weekends. As I said, he was a pilot, and he would fly me back into Culver City, where we was living at that time. So he devoted his 2 years to me, and he remained a friend, throughout. And so I was always devoted to him. In fact, he gave the arts building to the University of Tennessee. He was a graduate there. And we went back for the opening of that, and showed the yearling, of course. And so he was very generous, very interested in education, yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. What was it like working with Jane Wyman?
Jane Wyman, she was a lot of fun. She was very, very nice. She had just pretty much hit it, and she'd made, I don't know, Johnny, I forget what a movie was that she had made that was, well, she was very, it was kind of a breakthrough for her, and she was married to Ronald Reagan at the time, and when we did some scenes up at Lake Arrowhead in California, he came up. He'd just gotten out of the service.
Oh.
So I have some pictures of him up there, and then she said he was too boring.
Well, let's talk about the bear hunt. Let's talk about that bear hunt. What was that like?
Well, I heard a lot about it yesterday when the fellows were here talking about it. And basically, I guess there are certain bear dogs, and you guys out there know that you turn a dog loose on a bear and the bear runs. And they wouldn't let the bear run. And I'm still not sure about a lot of things, but all I know is that would be very difficult to make today. I don't think they would allow, because it's dangerous, it really is. But anyway, it's part of the movie, and people do remember that.
Yeah, because it was a real bear fight with real dogs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
Now, a lot of people here in Ocala, of course, are so familiar with Ross Allen, and you got to meet him, and he had a part in the snake bite scene that you could share with us.
Ross Allen used to take us alligator hunting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he would tell us, we'd go at night, go down the river, and he would go into the water, and I guess he could tell the size of the alligator by the eyes. And he says, what you have to do is you have to get up on them before they know it, because you got to keep their mouth closed. And if you keep their mouth closed, they give up. So they give up. But if they get their mouth open, you got a problem.
Well, look out.
But he was, and he also, I guess, I don't think he still does. His relatives are all here, but every day he would milk the venom out of the snake's teeth, put it over a glass, and he was an amazing guy. It really was. Never forget him. Yeah.
I bet not. So we learned in doing a little video that we've been working on the making of the movie that he had a part in putting his hand in there to get snake bit. Even though the fangs apparently had been removed. Lawrence Kinsey told us that story. So it was...
there was a plexiglass screen. So the screen, the snake was on the other side. So when he comes down, the snake literally goes at that. So he was safe. Yeah.
And from what I understand, really all through the years, in the early years in the Florida scrub, there were a lot of people who had snake bite stories. Yeah. It was very real that Marjorie wrote about. And that's the thing about Clarence Brown, that Clarence Brown really tried to stick to the book, I think. It was really important to him to do it and follow Marjorie's book.
Well, I think it really is. There are several scenes. I know they cut the movie down to 2 hours. I think it was like 2 hours and 20 minutes at one time. So they did cut some scenes out that we'd already filmed, but I think they wanted to keep it at 2 hours length. But I think he did certainly stay pretty much close to the story.
Well, we're so proud, Claude, that you are here today with us on this 75th anniversary of the premiere of the movie during this special month. And you must in your heart feel so good knowing that you were a part of a movie that is a classic for all time. I mean, there's been a lot of movies made, but this is one that continues to be shown all across the country, around the world. The Yearling book itself has never been out of print. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm very proud of that. I mean, it's how could I not be? You know, it's a wonderful story. It's a movie that I think would be very difficult to make today because I don't know whether they don't make movies 2 years in length, you know, to make, and it as I see it, I see a lot of people, not only my age, but people throughout. Oh, my grandchild sees it or whatever, and it's very emotional. I know I personally did not want my children to see it until they were 10 years old. I just thought it was a little too emotional. I know I remember Bambi, and I thought I almost died for a week after seeing Bambi. And so I just think people have to be careful about it, although today, who knows, things are a lot different. But anyway, to me, it was great. I've enjoyed coming down here. My wife, Katie. Katie, stand up.
Yes,
it's my
Katie,
wife.
please stand up. It's Katie Jarman.
It's my wife, Katie. And we just feel that I get lost coming down here everywhere we've been. Because I remember in 1945 there wasn't much here at that time, except Silver Springs, I think, was here.
Yeah, I think State Road 40 might have ended at Silver Springs. I don't know that for an absolute fact, but.
But anyway, the people have been wonderful. I think Barbara and you've done great jobs and great job here, and I hope that it helps to continue Marjorie's legacy here, which is she's still a very famous woman. I've read some books about her, and she's quite a character. And anyway, and I thank all of you for coming out, and I hope you enjoy the movie.
Thank you so much, Claude. Thank you so much. Yes, please enjoy the movie. We're going to take a little break now, so you can use the facilities and so forth. But thank you, Claude. Thanks again.